Welcome to Heart of a Father, where we're on this journey of discovering God's heart for us, how much He loves us as our Father, and out of that place of abiding in Him, producing lasting fruit. And we're in the midst of a conversation about faithfulness. Here with my good friend Steve Sizemore. Steve, it's a joy to be with you.
Thanks.
And just continue in that vein of faithfulness today. Talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, we've been celebrating the call of God upon our lives. We looked at the call to be a servant as a lifestyle to forever, and then also the call to faithfulness. And it's all part of our journey. We'll always be in school.
Yes.
On being a servant and being faithful, always. Part of that's because of my stubbornness. The reason why I'm so slow to learn sometimes is because I'm stubborn. It's not because I'm dull.
But we're all in school.
But we're all still in school.
For our entire lives.
Yeah, for our entire lives. I was thinking back to earlier parts of my journey when I first got engaged in youth with a mission. I remember I lived in a dorm. We lived in the barn. You're familiar with the facilities.
Oh, yeah.
And some people who are watching say, "Oh, I remember the barn," whatever. But we had these triple high bunks, in the guys' room there. And so I felt like God was speaking to me about faithfulness. And so I took some index cards, put them on the bottom of the bunk above me, which is a piece of plywood, so I could just tape it on there. So every morning, if it was light when I woke up, depending on the time of the year, then I would see that just straight above my head. He was faithful and little will be faithful also much. Like Lord, I feel like the Lord's trying to get that into me. I think back to an earlier time in my life when I was around 18. I had the privilege to serve as part of a work crew at a Young Life ranch in Colorado. And I was actually part of the pit crew, which was connected to the kitchen. We helped with food prep and cleanup. Food prep, serving, and cleanup. It was a great experience. There were 50 of us on this work crew from all across the United States. It was a great time. Great time of serving, long days, but it was great. And we studied the book of Philippians the whole month as a team. Had great leaders. And it's just rich. I remember one time we would do these big chicken barbecues with maybe 400 campers per week. And we would be critical, the pit crew would be critical in this outdoor barbecue. We had built these huge barbecue pits out of cinder blocks, and then we would barbecue chicken for 400 people there on the spot.
Wow.
We would have these long forks, and we'd take those quartered chickens and baptize them in a clean garbage can full of barbecue sauce. That was the process. So anyway, I remember after one of those events, during that month, we did it every week. After one of those events, I happened to be the last guy leaving the kitchen, and I was turning out the lights, and I noticed a pot sitting in the middle of the floor. I'm like, why is that sitting in the middle of the floor? I walked over to it and noticed it was a pot that had baked beans prepared in it, and the bottom of the pot was a little bit burnt. And I remember thinking, I am really tired. And I felt as if the Lord spoke and said, what are you going to do now? Nobody's watching. Just me. What do you want to do? I didn't feel threatened by God. It was like an invitation. Saying, we got accolades. The campers would cheer for us. They thought we were the greatest. But they were all gone at that time. They weren't around to watch me serve. So I remember choosing to clean that pot. And I think that was a learning lesson for me, is that this whole thing, if we live by faith, we live as unto the Lord. And He's delighted to show up in the secret place.
Yes.
But we're scrambling sometimes to get out of it. Like, I need a crowd. I need an audience, God. It's pretty quiet in here. Lights are dim. He said, I'm here. So that's power.
It is. Our lives are hidden with Christ in God.
Yeah.
And I think for some of us, it's a journey of learning to understand that just because they're hidden doesn't mean that God's never going to put us on display. He's proud of us as His sons and daughters. He's for us. But the affirmation that we're longing for in our hearts is the affirmation from Him. The affirmation of men is so fleeting. Yeah. And they can be combined. There's many times God uses healthy affirmation from men as an expression of His affirmation. We all know the difference deep in our hearts. It's in that place of faithfulness of just saying, I'm going to choose to do the little things, to bless him because I get to.
Yeah.
I get to, not because I have to. I get to take this pot of burnt beans that we all know wasn't a simple process to get that clean, but I'm going to do it as unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And how many times has he cleaned our pot of burnt beans up for us? That's, we talked about, I think it was in our last session, that he said, I came not to be served, but to serve. And that's what he does all the time for us. So that's where the rubber meets the road in this whole idea of faithfulness.
Yeah.
I know for me in my own journey, it's been, I'm so grateful that he works with us where we're at, because when I joined Youth of the Mission years ago, I wanted to conquer the world. I wanted to do things, and he had to lovingly draw me into the whole concept of what have I placed in your hands now, being faithful in that, and understanding that I belong to him, and who am I becoming. And I'll openly say that I didn't really understand that for years. I wanted to go conquer, and yet he was so loving. When I wanted to, after 6 months of training, move to Africa, and he's like, nope, stick around for 6 more months of training. And after those 6 months, I thought about going to Wycliffe Bible translators, and those things are good, but it wasn't what he had for me. In fact, he said to me very clearly, I remember being in Guatemala, in El Verbo church there, and at the end of a service afterwards, and just kind of nervous because it was several weeks away from graduating from my school of evangelism, and saying, God, what do you have next for me? And I thought he very clearly spoke to me, I still want to work on your character. And that was just a clear word to me. I knew that meant I needed to stick around in Youth of the Mission, and maybe I had a lot of character to work on because I was with Youth of the Mission for 20 years. But it was that process of not only belonging but becoming, and from that place of becoming, which I'm still learning what belonging and becoming looks like.
Sure.
So what am I called to do, and seeing the fruit from that.
Yeah. So when we think about this whole thing of being fruitful, there is a preparation phase. We embrace the identity and role of the servant. We embrace the opportunity to be faithful. But there's also preparation, and God wants to prepare us, sharpen our sword, or sometimes using the plow analogy, like if you're going to plow a field and your blade is only like 2 inches, you're not going to leave much of an impact.
No.
In fact, you may lose track of what you've plowed and what you haven't plowed. But then if you have a standard disc or a standard plow, how deep it is, your tractor may strain to pull it through the soil. And so but you know exactly where you've been. You can see impact. And so we think, Lord, prepare me. Do what you want to. Give me the blade you want me to have, the plow blade. What kind of impact do you want me to have? Sharpen my sword, etc. But that's also a continual process. So we yield to the training the preparation that God has for us. And that's a biblical pattern. You have Moses in the desert for 40 years before he led the children of Israel out. Joseph imprisoned, things like that were critical to their preparation. So we never know exactly what God wants to do, but we anticipate the opportunities for that preparation so that we'll have greater fruitfulness. And often that preparation is in the context of relationship with other people. He's going to impart to us through others. We're going to be sharpened by being close relationship with others who are wanting to do the same thing. And so God does prepare us and hones us so we can bear more fruit. Again, John 15, he prunes us so that we'll bear more fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actively prepares us for ministry, and he opens doors for us. If we embrace being a servant and being faithful, he'll open doors for greater preparation, leading to greater fruitfulness.
Yeah, that's powerful. So I invite you just to continue in this journey with us. In fact, we're going to continue this conversation next week, and I personally want to share a story about plowing because it's been powerful in my life of what God really wants to do. He wants to go deep. But we're going to pause here, Steve, and what does that look like for us as far as just in the context of faithfulness? What's something for us that we can allow God to work in us this week and the weeks to come in the area of faithfulness?
Yeah, we talked about the last few sessions about practical things to do. I think there's a piece here to really allow this process of learning to serve and learning to be faithful, that it's dynamic. It's dynamic. It's not just principle. It's not just accepting an idea, but there's a dynamic fellowship with God. So when you're as you're learning to serve, when you're in a place of serving, look for Jesus. It's like if we lost Jesus, where would you look for him? Well, you go look for where serving's taking place, because that's probably where you'd most likely find him, in a role of service.
Wow.
And so you look for him, discover him in that place of service. And in the place of faithfulness, let this tension of, it's the fear of the Lord. I'm doing this as unto you. I want to honor you. I know you're watching me, and joy, because this phrase that we're anticipating is, "Well done, good and faithful servant." It's when we stand before him. I'm so addicted. Maybe other people are so addicted to the "well done" from men that my ears are not tuned enough to the "well done" from his voice. But I pray that before that day happens, my ears will be really tuned for that, so that when I stand before him and I actually hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful Steve. Good and faithful Steve." That's the greeting we're all looking for. But just that dynamic relational nature, look for it as you're growing in these aspects.
That's so rich. So I invite all of us to look for Jesus in that place of service and faithfulness. As we do that, we're going to experience joy like we've never known. God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.